Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Connecticut's Old State House. We're so pleased to have you here today, and we're so pleased to be discussing Connecticut's new brand, Still Revolutionary. I'd like to start out by introducing Diane Smith. Diane, as you know, has actively promoted Connecticut as a great place to live, work, and play for more than 20 years. She has written 6 books about Connecticut and how great it is, and given countless speeches all over Connecticut. And I didn't realize this until today, but her TV series, Positively Connecticut, was the longest-running TV series in state history. So it is, yes, that is very impressive. I hadn't known that at all. So it's no wonder that many people have called Diane Smith Connecticut's ambassador. She's been a wonderful ambassador for a great state, and we're really happy to have her associated with Connecticut's Old State House. And we're very happy to be bringing this talk to you today with help from the Connecticut Humanities Council and others of our friends. And I would like you to please join me in welcoming Diane Smith.
Thank you, and thank you for being here for the taping of this CTN television show, which is Still Revolutionary, a conversation with Kip Bergstrom. We're going to be looking for you to make some comments when Kip and I sit down to do our conversation, but first he's going to have a short program. So I should say that Sally said that I was unofficially known as Connecticut's ambassador. Well, the man who officially has the title is our guest today, and that is Kip Bergstrom. I want to just start out by thinking a little bit about how you brand a state, and I thought of some of the slogans that stuck out for me. I love New York. It's probably the gorilla of all of them. Virginia is for lovers. Wyoming, like no place on earth. And then there have been some in Connecticut, of course. We've had classic Connecticut. Connecticut, we're full of surprises. Better yet, Connecticut. And our new campaign about Connecticut, Still Revolutionary. Marketing a state is an intriguing business. How does Connecticut see itself? How do people from other states see us? How much of a marketing campaign is about attracting visitors? How much of it is about our own self-image? When the governor announced this campaign, he mentioned that this would be a way for Connecticut to, as he put it, get its step back. How much of it is about attracting and retaining businesses in the state? Well, all of that is in the hands of the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Economic and Community Development, Christopher Kip Bergstrom. Kip has 30 years of experience as a strategist, a business executive, an economic development professional, and a placemaker. He is a nationally prominent advocate of place-centric economic development. Today we'll find out what that means. And he has participated in the successful repositioning of the city of Stamford as the alternative to New York for the financial industry and the banking industry. It's become a big satellite city. When Kip does this kind of work, he looks at the big picture on economic development, including tourism, education, transportation, technology, real estate development, the whole ball of wax. In April 2011, the General Assembly approved Kip as the Executive Director of the Commissioner on Culture and Tourism. That job didn't last too long, though. 3 months later, the Commission merged into the Department of Economic and Community Development, and Kip became a Deputy Commissioner of DECD with a portfolio that includes statewide branding as well as the arts and culture, historic preservation, and tourism functions. Kip actually had been the executive director of the development agency for the city of Stamford, which is what helped transform that city. And that was his second time around in Stamford. Kip was there in the mid-'90s. He was Stamford's first economic development director and helped in 66 successful business recruitment and retention projects, totaling over 6,000 jobs, including the attraction of UBS with 2,200 jobs. In between, Kip was the executive director of the Rhode Island Policy Council, a partnership of leaders of business, labor, government, and higher education in that position. So he helped develop an economic strategy for the state of Rhode Island. Kip has a presentation to share with you now, and then we're going to have a conversation and have time for your questions. So thank you for being here. Kip Bergstrom.
Thanks a lot, Diane. Still Revolutionary is a brand, not a tagline. A tagline is a throwaway. Forgettable as soon as it's said because it's not distinctive. Diane actually gave you some examples. Classic Connecticut. discover Connecticut. Connecticut, we're full of surprises. These could be used by virtually all 50 states, and as a result are both meaningless and ineffective in breaking through the noise of our crowded media environment. A brand, on the other hand, is a compelling story. In our case, the story of our state, where we've been, who we are, and where we're going. There can only be one brand for a state, otherwise you dilute your message. A state brand must work for tourism, business development, talent recruitment, and most importantly, as the shared identity of our residents. Because the brand must serve all of these purposes, we developed it very carefully through an accelerated but rigorous process of qualitative and quantitative research with target segments in this region and nationwide, and brand workshops with over 1,500 Connecticut residents. So, Still Revolutionary is not just a tourism brand. Tourism is simply the engine that we're using to establish the brand, because tourism requires a broad media approach, and because it generates short-term revenue that more than covers the cost of marketing. The single brand, Still Revolutionary, will be what we use for everything we do. It's not a one-time tagline. It's a brand that should last for decades, improving with age. A brand achieves power by the reinforcement of many campaigns over many years, and especially by the viral retelling of the brand's story by thousands of individual brand champions. We invite the residents of Connecticut to become our brand champions, telling and retelling our story to friends and associates. To do that well, it's important to understand what Still Revolutionary means. So I'll make 3 points on that. And the first is this: it is a brand grounded in our history and in the history of our nation. Connecticut is one of 13 states that could lay claim to history as a differentiator. Oddly, none of the other states have claimed it as a position, so it's ours for the taking. But history can be tricky as a foundation for a brand. If you claim to be a place of history, it could tar you as a place that's fossilized, stuck in the past. But fortunately, our history is in fact the history of change. We have always been a place of ideas and innovation, and still are. The brand pays homage to the outsized role that Connecticut played in the Revolution, but we deliberately use lowercase to make the point that Connecticut has been and still is revolutionary in many other ways. For 350 years, Connecticut has had a steady habit of revolutionary thought and action. That's in part because we're the first state to establish in our fundamental orders of 1639 the foundation of constitutional law that is an essential prerequisite for risk-taking and innovation. The U.S. Constitution was signed in 1787, almost 150 years later. Connecticut used this head start to put itself at the center of every political, social, cultural, and economic revolution in the history of our nation. Now, that's a big boast. So let me give you a few examples to prove the point. Because of our unique royal charter issued in 1662, Connecticut never had a royal governor, but rather always elected its own. This is the charter oak where we hid the charter to keep the king from taking it back. Because of the charter, our governor, Jonathan Trumbull, was the only governor in 1776 to support the Revolution, because all of the other governors were stooges of the king. We are the home of Harriet Beecher Stowe, who popularized the abolition of slavery, helping to trigger the Civil War. Sam Colt and Eli Whitney built their businesses in Connecticut, making our state the apogee of the American Industrial Revolution. Mark Twain wrote his best novels here, including The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, which revolutionized the novel as an art form, not just in this country, but globally. Revolutionized the novel as an art form. We have the oldest art museum in the country, which also was the first art museum to stage an exhibition of modern art, which sent shockwaves through the art establishment at the time. Igor Sikorsky invented the helicopter in Connecticut, and the company he founded continues to be the cutting edge of innovation in vertical flight. 50 years ago, 5 alumni of the Yale Drama School formed 5 regional producing theaters in Connecticut, which year after year win Tony Awards and Pulitzer Prizes. We were the first state to elect a woman governor, Ella Grasso. The living researchers at our universities and research labs have garnered over 100 Nobel Prizes and nominations to our distinguished National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine. We were the first state to invest in stem cell research and have embraced the next frontier of science, personalized medicine. The list goes on and on. In every facet of life, Connecticut has been an innovator and continues to innovate. With the brand still revolutionary, we honor our heritage and chart our future. I'm now going to play the new TV ad that we've been running since last week, which showcases the revolutionary and groundbreaking advances that are happening in Connecticut because of the forward-thinking companies that do business in the state. The campaign features cutting-edge companies pushing the boundaries of their sector through a commitment to ongoing innovation and growth, including ESPN, Alexion Pharmaceuticals, and Pratt & Whitney. ESPN is a pioneer in digital media. Alexion Pharmaceuticals was recently ranked the second most innovative company in America and is a biopharmaceutical company focused on serving patients with severe and ultra-rare disorders. And Pratt & Whitney designed the quietest and most fuel-efficient jet engine in the world.
We're Pratt & Whitney, designing the world's quietest, most fuel-efficient jet engines. We're Alexion Pharmaceuticals, breaking new ground in the fight for patients with severe and ultra-rare diseases. We're Connecticut, companies large and small, using our revolutionary spirit to work smarter to drive innovation. We're Connecticut, working hard. We've created 20,000 new jobs in these tough times. Join us and learn the advantages of doing business here at ctforbusiness.com.
It's amazing how short 30 seconds is. So those are just 3 examples of firms that are inventing the future today in Connecticut. We feature an additional 7 examples on our website, ctforbusiness.com, and there are hundreds more like them, which we'll feature over time. Now, why is that? Why is it that after all these years, Connecticut continues to inspire innovation in business, culture, and civic life? What continues to make us revolutionary? I think one of the sources is the inspiration of places that matter. In the development of the brand, we talked to more than 1,500 people about what Connecticut means. And what they told us is that Connecticut is a place of intimate places and hidden gems that inspire them. This is particularly important for tourism because places that matter to visitors are precisely the places that matter to residents. Connecticut is not a theme park or a resort. We didn't make our places for tourists. We made them for ourselves, and I think those places in turn have made us. So while I'm talking a little bit about place, I'm going to show you some of the still photography from the fall tourism campaign, just as visual wallpaper. So I don't think it's an accident that the people of Connecticut are highly educated, intellectually curious, and tolerant, and notably more so than in most other places. It's because this place attracts and develops people with those qualities. Connecticut is a collection of places that matter to us. Villages, towns, and small cities where the stories of our predecessors are etched into our buildings and onto our landscapes, and where we in turn are inspired to leave our mark. How, we ask ourselves, will our lives look to the future based on what we leave behind? Most of our places have layered meanings, as a place of history is usually not a place with one story, but rather with many, often conflicting stories. And I take these next couple of sentences from David Leff's new book, Hidden in Plain Sight. Experiencing Connecticut deeply helps one to understand and piece together the divergent, often chaotic aspects of our everyday encounters, giving our residents the capacity to look at common objects and places on multiple levels. Our landscapes are filled with nuance and teach us to appreciate it. Our places educate us, they stimulate our curiosity, they nurture tolerance. So I grew up in the West, where history is like a butterfly on a mounting board under glass. You can look at it, but you can't touch it. So it blew my mind when I moved here that you could sleep in history, work in history, eat in history, hold your most significant public and private events in history. Our ancestors and their stories are always with us here, and those stories help to guide us forward. Connecticut's lived-in history and intimacy of scale attract and produce people who want to make a difference. It is a place not only where you can make a difference, but where you do, where you leave your mark, adding to the marks of those who have come before you. So what does this have to do with tourism? Well, fully 2/3 of people who travel want to add a cultural experience to their trip. Yes, they may go to the beach, but they also want to dip into the history and the culture of a place. Unfortunately, too much of the American landscape offers them precious little opportunity to do so. There's a theme park or resort maybe, but in a sea of industrial, agriculture, strip malls, and subdivisions. In Connecticut, we have great natural beauty. Our coastline and our river valleys are exquisite. The landscapes of our northwest and northeast hills are some of the finest in New England. But what sets us apart is our marriage of nature and culture. The coast, the marshes, the river valleys, and the hills are dotted with villages, towns, and small cities that are full of cultural treasures. Art museums, theaters, music and dance companies, galleries, one-of-a-kind shops and restaurants, historic districts, science centers, aquariums, and vibrant ethnic neighborhoods. We are a rich, largely hidden tapestry of places that matter. What we have is not easy to see. You have to work to find it. And that makes it especially compelling because we offer the ultimate travel experience, the opportunity to discover something new, something you didn't know. I'm now going to play the new TV spot that features one of our hidden places that is particularly lovely in the fall, the towns of northwestern Connecticut, who have recently taken to calling themselves the Secret Corner. The ad tells the story of 5 friends on a weekend getaway, boating, biking, hiking, fly fishing, shopping, dining, and soaking up the magic of this special place.
Plan your fall getaway at ctvisit.com. Connecticut, still revolutionary.
So my final point about still revolutionary is this, that it captures the idea that democracy is not a noun, it's a verb. At the beginning of June, I spoke about the brand at an event in Bolton, commemorating a French encampment on the Washington Bow Revolutionary Route, the path that the 2 generals took through the breadth of Connecticut to their victory in Yorktown. And after the event, I spoke with the commander of Sheldon's 2nd Light Dragoons, which is a Revolutionary War reenactment unit of the 1st U.S. Cavalry Regiment. It's a Connecticut regiment. It was Washington's personal bodyguard and communication corps. And he came up to me afterwards and said, "I really like the brand." And I said, "Really? Why?" He says, "Well, because you obviously get it." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He says, "Well, you know what all reenactors know." And I said, "Well, what's that?" He said, "The revolution never ended." The revolution never ended. How cool is that? So it made me think about another conversation, maybe 25 years ago, that I had with a guy by the name of Adam Michnik, who is the editor of the largest daily newspaper in Europe, Gazeta Warszava, and a former Solidarity activist. He had been jailed during martial law for his dissidence. As you know, at the end of martial law, the Soviets left. Solidarity won the election. He was worried about the complacency among his colleagues, who he thought they seemed to think their job was done. So he wrote this very famous op-ed piece, and he paraphrased it to me that night at dinner, and it stuck with me ever since, and I paraphrase it to you. He said, "Democracy is not a noun. It's a verb. It's a never-ending process. It's not something that you have. It's something that you make every day."
Follow your heart, born to
Thank you. It's amazing what you can do when you have 2 minutes rather than 30 seconds. So that's an online piece that we did with the material from our summer video. And before we go to questions with Diane, I want to say a little bit about the creative concept. And that is, well, first of all, 180,000 people have downloaded that. So we set the ad to music without voiceover, because we wanted to intensify its emotional pull. We were quite deliberately pulling on your heartstrings. My daughter actually told me she cried, which she's a hard-ass lawyer. So that was a major breakthrough. So the music was composed specifically for us by Bruce Woolley, who some of you may know did the first music video ever, and was performed by the Hartford Symphony Orchestra under its dynamic young Asian American conductor, Carolyn Kwan, who chose to direct the Hartford Symphony because she thinks Connecticut is the best place in America to revolutionize the performance of classical music. This is a place where she thinks she can make a difference. The singer is Danielle Glaze, a Trinidad-born student at UConn. The song longs, seeks, and soars, embracing life and love. It builds to a bracing, exuberant exultation. A vocal flag waving at the top of a rock at the shore. A vocal zip line plunge into the brownstone quarry. The people in the ads are not props. They're real characters with stories that blend the old and the new, stories of discovery, of seeing and experiencing new things. Stories of people being inspired by places and events that will stay with them long after their vacation ends. They exemplify the state's diversity of people. They are passionately engaging life, drawing inspiration from places that matter, places that are uniquely Connecticut places. Zest for life, places that matter, people who make a difference. That's what it feels like to be still revolutionary. Thank you.
As I said, we're going to give you a chance to ask your own questions. We will have a microphone that'll be roaming through the audience, so if you just raise your hand, I'll make sure that we call on you. But first, I have a few questions of my own. And now, Kip, I like the way you're branding yourself. It's pretty good.
You got to believe in the brand.
Exactly. Some people who are here are involved in tourism or involved in museums, and so they know what you mean by the term placemaking. But I want to make sure that everyone in our TV audience understands what that term means.
I think you know the difference between a generic place and a real place, an authentic place, a place that means something to you, a place that matters. Those are all synonymous, versus the broad swath of our landscape, the United States of Generica, that, you could be in one place or another place, you wouldn't know where you were, it all looks the same. So the places that look different, that's another expression. Things look different here. Well, if that's true, that's a place. If they don't look different, then it's an unplace. And so I think my own view is that our highest calling as a species is to create great places. We've been doing it for 40,000 years since we put our hands up against the rock wall and blew pigment around them and made the first crude cave painting, and we said, we're here, this is our place. And, while we've gotten much better at placemaking over the years, it still has the magic of that first moment where they took a hunk of rock and made it into a place of meaning. They took a place that was dark and scary and made it vital and safe. So that's what I mean by placemaking.
I was similarly blown away when I first moved to Connecticut, as you were, about you could sleep in history, you could work in history, you could eat in history. How do we make that a virtue in our daily lives as people who live here, and how do we use that to attract people here?
This space right here is a case in point. I got married here 32 years ago. The Statue of Justice that's up at the top of the stairs was here at that point. It was still not renovated yet. Bill Foudy had this idea that if folks could come in and use it, that he could get their help in raising the money to renovate it, and that certainly worked in our case. But I think whether folks realize it or not, I mean, that's a very explicit connection to historic place. Whether they realize it or not, their lives here in Connecticut are imbued with history, and that fact is changing them, again, whether they know it or not. But what we found in our brand workshops is that folks do know it, and they consistently say they chose to come here or to stay here because it's a place where they think they can make a difference. Mm-hmm. And they, by and large, feel they have made a difference. Mm-hmm. It's not just potential, it's what they're doing, so they're feeling effective. That's why I came here. I could choose a number of places. I chose to come to Hartford because I thought it was big enough to have all the problems of any place, but small enough to solve them, and that I could make a difference. And, somehow, some way, I think I have. And I think a lot of people have that. It's their own reason in their own place within Connecticut, but they're here. We can whine about the fact that we have 169 cities and towns, or we can say, wow, we have 169 opportunities to engage. And folks are engaging. They're citizens in a fundamental way that people aren't in other places.
Well, I liked what you said about democracy being a verb, because I think that's what we try to exemplify at CTN every day, that democracy goes on day after day after day, and that the people being able to watch and participate is what makes democracy happen, that you can't just solidify it in rock and say, we're done. It's
exactly.
Democracy now.
There was a mural that just went up in Hartford on the wall of the deconsecrated synagogue at 215 Pearl Street, and it's a mural of the Charter Oak that blends into the brick wall when it's not wet, but when it's wet, the oak appears, and then as it dries, it disappears. And to me, what that says is democracy is something that you have to water every day or it disappears. Mm-hmm. And I think we embody that notion as a state.
Yeah. I love that. Tell us a little bit about how the campaign helped for the summer tourism season. Is it too soon to tell, or are the numbers?
Well, we know right away we got a 100% increase in our website. And again, the call to action at the end of the commercial is to go to ctvisit.com. So the first, iron test of the campaign is it driving people to the website. We had a 100% increase in traffic. Probably more significantly, we had over 100,000 new subscribers sign up for our e-newsletter and subject themselves to our constant marketing through an e-newsletter. And what we know from the research we've done on our subscribers is those folks tend to visit Connecticut 3 times a year. They spend about $10,000 a visit. So altogether, those folks have generated or will generate about $20 million in state sales tax, meal tax. So the campaign has already more than paid for itself.
Well, that was my next question, was with a $27 million campaign, do you calculate an expected return on investment?
Yeah, 3 to 1 is what the econometric models that Longwood is the Tiffany firm in this, and based on our demographics and based on the gigantic market that we're next to in New York and the larger, day's drive away market, the expectation is that for every dollar we spend on tourism marketing, we'll get $3 back in state and local taxes. So $15 million a year should generate $45 million a year in incremental taxes.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the 2 markets that we're side by side with, and I'm wondering which states are you targeting to bring in visitors? Because I've talked to people who have family that live out of state, and they've said, oh, my mom sees those commercials all the time. So what states are we going for?
Well, we heavily in the New York metro market, so New York City, Westchester County, Northern Jersey, Eastern Pennsylvania, to a lesser extent in the Boston market, but we also bought national cable, and so it ran beyond that market in a number of places. I know during the Olympics, somebody told me they saw it when they were in Nova Scotia. Somebody else saw it when they were on a cruise. So I think, the ones that were picking up the cable feeds on the Olympics were getting our commercials pretty heavily.
I know some people in Maryland who saw it, who used to live here. So
that just probably through the cable.
Yeah.
Because we didn't buy regular non-cable media in Maryland. So.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about what's happening in the state today, and I think the business commercial just touched on the very tip of it, that's indicative of this continuation of the revolutionary spirit that got us started here.
Well, one of the things that's really interesting about the Connecticut economy is we have a number of very large companies. And, you free associate with large company, a lot of folks might think mature, stale, old. But that's absolutely not the case with our companies. They're some of the most innovative companies in their sector. Pratt & Whitney just revolutionized the commercial aviation industry with its new engine. They haven't lost a single contract that they've bid on. It's a disruptive technology. They're practicing creative destruction like an entrepreneur would on their industry as the dominant player in it. It's amazing. ESPN, which is in a sense invented cable. I found out when we were doing the commercial that they had built the infrastructure for high-definition television before there was high-definition television. So they're always a step ahead. And a company like Alexion Pharmaceuticals that started here from scratch and has grown like crazy, really figured out how to make a viable company serving ultra-rare diseases. Now, if you're somebody that has an ultra-rare disease, that's a really, really important thing, that somebody has figured out how to make money curing your disease, because nobody had been able to do that before. And it's one field after another in manufacturing and in digital media and financial services. Aetna is the leading innovator. Life sciences in both devices and in the therapy side of it. We have a very interesting combination of deep research, very large clinical practices in the hospitals, and the insurance company payers. So, in personalized medicine, the question is, who's going to pay for it? Well, we have the people here who are going to answer that question, and we should be able to do something that no one else can do by putting together the researchers, the clinicians, and the payers to really define this new industry. So, part of it is that Connecticut has had to repeatedly reinvent itself economically. It's done it many times. And so we're used to it. We have sort of the synapses and the muscle mass to do reinvention well. It doesn't scare us. We're up to it. And, I basically say don't bet against Connecticut.
Yeah.
Don't bet against Connecticut.
One of the things that we've sort of painted you today as a person involved in tourism and the arts and history, but I know that you were instrumental in bringing Jackson Labs to this state, which is going to be a tremendous development for Connecticut.
Well, that success has many fathers, and that has many fathers and mothers. I made the first phone call at the suggestion of Tim Bannon, and a number of us helped with it, but that will be a game-changing new resource in Connecticut, building a huge complementary research capacity to what Yale's already doing and what UConn is doing and is planning to do with its expansion, and the putting together of those three plus some of the smaller schools and hospitals. We should be able to carve out a niche for ourselves in personalized medicine where we can be the thought leader.
I'd like to invite anybody who has questions, who wants to ask Kip a question, to please raise your hand, and I'll call on you when you're ready. Yes, Lady Right. Just 1 minute. We want to wait for the microphone so we can hear you on TV.
I wonder if the structure of town government and state government is an illustration of democracy in action in the state, and is it taught in the schools, and if so, where, and how often is it repeated?
Well, there's concern, I know, particularly on Senator Don Williams' part, who's the Senate President, that we don't do a good enough job as a state. We're not just talking about teachers in schools. We're really talking about the whole family of the state in teaching our history to our kids. it was his experience and mine that our parents brought us to museums and taught us the history of our states and the history of our nation, and it's less true today. So we're trying to work to make it cheaper for families to experience our museums, and also to do a better job of telling their stories. One of the initiatives we're doing is something called Connecticut Treasures, 50 places, museums, historic houses, historic districts, natural spots, science centers, and the like, that kind of meet the standard of national significance. And we're doing 5-minute vignettes on each of them, which will run on Connecticut Public Television. This was an idea of Jerry Ferguson's and Bill Hosley's and others, and we run with it. And I think that'll create a base of material to help tell the story, because I think it's easier to tell the story if you have places and objects that bring it to life. And we arguably haven't done as good a job of that as we need to do. It's vital. It's actually vital. I mean, the very first, tourism attractions and museums were created explicitly to develop citizenship. That was the reason for them. It wasn't for revenue. It wasn't to encourage tourism. It was to make citizens. That was our first historic sites were created for that purpose. And, in a way, that's still fundamentally the most important purpose of what we're doing. So we need to do it better, I would say, than we've been doing it.
Right here, if you just wait for the microphone to come to you.
Question. I noticed back some years ago, say, when we had a popular TV show filmed or set in Hartford, like Judging Amy, for example, the landmarks that were shown on the Lawrence Street, Arbor Street and all, I thought, people would want to come and see those. And when people came to Hartford, there was no vehicle in place to take them to see these famous sites from pop culture. Similarly, Meryl Streep just had a film, filmed in Stonington. And I think there is an interest in that. And are you looking for opportunities such as that? I mean, Billy Joel, I think, shot his first video on a bridge on the Connecticut River down Haddam Way.
So you would give folks the opportunity to follow the trail of sites in the movie they just saw. Yeah, well, so the new technology...
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea. And the new technology of phone apps really enables us to do that easily. So you can create an app that strings together a number of sites. When you get to that, it tells you what it does the interpretation on your phone app, tells you what it is, tells you how to get there. So that we're going to move in that direction. I also think that the Internet itself enables us to... a lot of the places in Connecticut, and a lot of those cultural treasures, and by the way, when we started out thinking there were 50, and did we have 50, we quickly realized which 50, so we called it Volume 1. There'll be a Volume 2, and we started working on thinking what would Volume 2 be, and we realized, there's going to have to be a Volume 3. So in this tiny little state, we have 150 cultural treasures of national significance. But one of the things is any one of those treasures is probably not interesting to everybody. There's a niche for it. And in the old days of mass media, it was very expensive to market niche products to niche audiences. But with social media, with the Internet, you can do that very cheaply. So we need to do that. We're focused on doing that. I think our ctvisit.com website does a pretty good job of it, and I would put it up there in the top ranks of state tourism websites, but we're committed to pushing it even further. Here's the thing about a position like Still Revolutionary. People expect it. So when they go to your website, they expect it to be revolutionary. And if they go to it the next day, they expect it to be revolutionary in some new way. So this position that we've staked out for ourselves, which I think, really accurately describes the state as a whole, creates a bar for our own work that keeps getting raised and raised just by the nature of the position. We have to constantly be pushing the bar. That's a good idea. We'll figure out how to do it.
I mean, if you can go on a Sex and the City tour when you're in New York, why not? I love that idea.
Well, somebody did this thing with in Google. You have autofill, so they asked Google autofill, and they put each state's name in it. Why is Connecticut so blank? And they did it for all 50 states, and then they tabulated the results. They showed you this map, and you could cursor over the states, and the 3 or 4 attributes would pop up. Every single state, boring. Somebody thinks every state is boring. Probably their own residents, who knows. So you have to discount boring. And some of them had, beautiful, ugly, hot, cold, liberal, racist, blue, red, whatever. But so what did they have for Connecticut? Rich, expensive, right? Now the third one is going to surprise you. No? Haunted.
Haunted?
Haunted. There was only one other that was haunted. That was Pennsylvania. And as I've, started asking around, it turns out there's a lot of shows that feature haunted stuff in Connecticut. And you have to say, you have to have history to have haunted stuff, right? There's no such thing as a ghost in a new place, right? So it kind of fits. So I'm thinking, let's go with it. Let's do the haunted trail in Connecticut, right? So everything is an opportunity to do a trail.
Yeah.
I talked about, ethnic neighborhoods. So John McNamara is here from New Britain and knows of that city's vibrant Polish ethnic neighborhood. Turns out there's 100 ethnicities in Connecticut that are deeply enough represented here to have their own state historical society. 100, right? So we've got a proposal to them. You document your history. We'll give you a grant to do that. If you do that, and by history, places, objects, physical, ephemeral, past, present, serious, fun, the whole bit, the whole resource of what your ethnicity's experience is in Connecticut. If you do that, then working with the Humanities Council, we'll give you another grant to make it into a compelling visitor experience through a phone app or something else. So there might someday be a Polish trail, an Italian trail, a Laotian trail, a Jamaican trail, an Italian trail. Italian trail, you may have to do it for several different Italian village societies because it's organized that way. So we just have so many of these interesting little gem niche products, whether it's ethnicities or different kinds of history. I once threatened to go on to WPNR, they haven't taken me up on it, to do Stump the Chumps, the tourism version. You give me something that you're interested in, I will tell you someplace in Connecticut you can do it. And if you stump me, other folks call in and tell us where they can do it. Because I think that there's such a richness of places and things and pursuits here, natural and cultural, all packed in together, that it's probably true. It's probably true that you can find someplace, somewhere to do anything you could think of in here. And so we need to find a way to reveal that to people, to kind of give them a map to it, and make it easier for them to find it without depriving them of the joy of discovery. So there's a trade-off there.
So if anybody here wants to stump the chumps, you can go ahead and ask the question. Yes, back there.
Kip, on the business side, can you tell us a little bit more about your media buy and what your hopes are in that regard?
It's mostly cable, and it's some of the local news programs. But so the tourism commercials were running on the season premieres of the major shows. Not a particularly effective way to communicate to a business leader audience. So the business ads are running more on the cable news programs and the local news programs in Connecticut and the cable news programs nationally. And we're doing some limited print in some of the industry publications that support that, and then we'll have a very aggressive online campaign targeted to different sectors where we can show, as I indicated with the tourism stuff, we're in a longer treatment of 90 seconds, 2 minutes, you can tell a richer story. And then we'll have, we have vignettes on, it will be soon about 10 companies besides the 3 that are in the TV commercial. Just to give a sense of how much is going on here, obviously it's not just 10 companies, it's hundreds of companies, but they're meant to be iconic of what else is happening in the economy, just as the places that we've concentrated the tourism ads so far aren't meant to just be focused on driving people to that specific attraction. It's trying to give you a sense of what there is in Connecticut. And the nature of doing those sort of location shoots, you have to really zero in one place, otherwise you're paying this whole crew for driving around. You really want to keep them in one place. So we did the Mystic area and the River Valley in the first campaign. We did the northwest corner in this campaign. That's only scratching the surface of what the state has to offer in terms of a tourism product. It'll probably take us 5 years to get all the way around the state to all the different places before we'd have to start repeating. That's how amazing our product is, that we have all that depth.
Someone told me today that you're going to be going after attracting dog owners to visit the state.
Wow, you've got great sources. Yeah, we had a brainstorming session the other day with our team that works on the website, and we're already starting to compile dog-friendly places, inns, and the like that we can put on that website. But I would say this, don't be surprised if there's a dog in the next ad. So here's the thing about a drive-to site versus a fly-to site. Because people that come here mainly drive here. You can bring your dog with you, right? And lots of people have dogs. I happen to have 6, so I'm biased. But it's a big market. And we can immediately start to reveal how easy it is to go places with a dog. But we have over 800 miles of hiking trails in Connecticut. 800 miles. I think it's more than Vermont. And
It's just the most per capita.
Well, okay, but what's Vermont, Yeah, I know, but it's just one trail. It's like 100 miles. We got 800 miles. But anyway, we got a lot of trails, and the Trails Association calls us the state of trails because we consistently have the most trails events on Trails Day. I've actually hiked all 800 miles of the trails, and that's because I had a Labrador that made me do it over a 13-year period. And most people that are walking, somebody told me this, I don't know what it is, 60 or 70% of the walking by Americans is caused by their dogs. But for their dogs, they wouldn't be out there walking. So we have all this hiking and walking and stuff to do, and who tends to do it are people with dogs, so why not market to them, So anyway, that's something we're thinking about.
That's just a little bit of eccentric genius. It is. It's genius. I don't know how many cat people we're going to attract, but dog people, I'm all for that. Does anyone else have a question that they'd like to ask Kip? Right here, yes.
Can you talk a bit about our competitors for the tourism dollars, such as Vermont, New Hampshire also have the river, the covered bridges?
Yeah, interestingly, though, Yankee Magazine has pretty consistently ranked Kent as the best place to view fall foliage in New England. You hear that, Vermont, if you're watching this? We got better fall foliage than you do. Hey, it's a competition. They take their best shot. I think the difference is with what we're doing, all these ads need to show people having fun in Connecticut, having fun in the summer, having fun in the fall, doing the kinds of things they like to do. We have this, we have a tourism industry that employs 100,000 people. It's based on $10 billion a year of spending in Connecticut by tourists. 10 billion produces 100,000 jobs, produces $1 billion of state and local tax. The reality is it could be 20 billion. It could employ 200,000 people. It could produce 2 billion of state taxes if we only had our per capita share of the tourism market that's a day's drive away. There's this enormous number of Americans that live within a day's drive of here that spend an enormous amount of money on tourism. We know the things they like to do. There are things that they can do in Connecticut. We knew when we started that they had no idea they could do them in Connecticut. We know from our research that if we show them they can do them in Connecticut, they will do them in Connecticut. So, yes, you can get ethnicity and culture in New York City, and you can get the outdoors in Vermont. But if you want both at the same time, you got to come to Connecticut. So there's stuff that people want to do that they can do here. They may also do it other places. That's fine. We don't have to have every dollar. We just want our share and a bigger share than we have. And so we have to show people doing that. So that has to be part of these ads. But at the same time, we can be using the ads to do something beyond tourism, and that's to say, who are we? Where are we going? What's our story as a state? And build a brand that works not just for tourism, but also works for business recruitment and for recruiting the young mobile talent that is the lifeblood of business growth, that want to be, both businesses and young people want to be in places that are building the future. And so while we tell a tourism story, we have to be telling a story about the fact that we're still revolutionary. We've still got it. We still have it in us to do great things. And this is a place where folks who haven't given up, who really want to make their mark, can come and make their mark. So it needs to be transactional, that kind of gets in the middle of the impulse purchase that people are making. Tourism, you plan your tourism trips several times a year. Some of them on impulse, particularly the getaways. And so you want to be right in the middle of that transaction. They need to know that you're an option when they're making that choice. And to know that you're an option, you have to be marketing to them. But at the same time as we're doing that and getting money from doing that, we need to be building something bigger, which is, what do we mean as a state? What's our brand? Who are we? Where are we going? So we're trying to do both those things at the same time, and we think this brand of Still Revolutionary captures all that. It's direct for business. Still Revolutionary is a direct translation for business. Businesses want to be where the future's being invented because they're part of that. It's indirect for tourists because the connection between that and the tourism experience is place. Place inspires revolutionary thought and action. It inspires people to want to make a difference. And the places that do that, that matter to us, that are real to us, those are the places that people want to visit. Those are the interesting places that aren't like everywhere else. It's those places that are inspiring to people that folks want to go and see. So it's kind of a indirect connection to tourism, direct connection to business, and overall sort of saying who we are. That's what we're trying to get at with this.
Would you tell us any of the, I don't want to call it a tagline because you said those are throwaways, but a slogan or alternatives to Still Revolutionary that you rejected?
Well, what we knew was, the word that came out of the branding workshops was this notion of inspiration, of places being inspiring, of the experience of being in Connecticut as being one of being inspired to make your mark. So there was that notion of inspiration, and we played with various ways to do that, but it's very difficult to go that route and not have something that feels like it could be said about any place. Mm-hmm. So by Still Revolutionary, I mean, there's only really the set of states who could use the word revolutionary in that sense of being still revolutionary, that's both looking back and looking forward, there's only 13 states that can do that. And none of them have. So it was ours for the taking. I think the revolutionary part is a set of 13. The still part of it, how many of the 13 original colonies are still revolutionary? Well, there may be some others besides us. Hey, but we took it. We took it first. So, I think it fits us. And there were other things having to do with inspiration that would have fit us, but would not have been as ownable. And a brand that's not ownable is not a brand. If everyone else can say it about themselves, then it doesn't work as a brand. You have to own it. I Love New York was an incredible brand. I think they got worried that other folks were saying, I love blank, whatever it was. And all those places were doing were reinforcing New York's brand equity. New York is crazy to move at all off of I Love New York. They own that. And every person that says I love something else is indirectly saying I love New York. They're reinforcing New York's brand. They own that brand. So anybody that imitates us, if we get a head start and we're out there with us around this concept of revolutionary, will reinforce our brand. We'll own the brand. There's the other stuff about inspiring inspiration. There are existing state taglines that have some of that element in them, and you can imagine a number of them that might, and it wasn't a space that we felt we could own. And, we tested them. We tested them with focus groups. We knew that Still Revolutionary was going to have a whole group of people that really liked it and a whole group of people that didn't. And actually, that made it more attractive to me. Because a brand that you don't talk about is the same as no brand. Yeah. So all the controversy, to the extent that, overwhelmingly, the chatter on the internet sites, and we tracked them all, was neutral to positive. But even the negatives helped us in the sense that it got conversation about it, and got coverage about it. How many people talked about Connecticut were full of surprises? That's true. We are full of surprises, but it's not a phrase that anybody's going to have a water cooler conversation about or argument about. And so in branding, controversy is actually a really good thing. And over time, I think folks will try it on and wear it. One of the things we did ask people was, of these different taglines that we were considering, which would you wear on a T-shirt? This one won hands down.
The T-shirt marker, it's critical. We have time for one more question. Yes.
Basically, what revolutionary methodology in education, either in methodology or institutions, have you addressed so that you have opportunity for young people to live here? And I noticed in your commercials that you tended to pick very large companies as opposed to revolutionary small companies, and are you going to address that?
Well, Alexion is a company that didn't exist a few years ago and is a small company in the process of being a large company. And ESPN started within our lifetime. But of the total 10, at least half are small companies. Again, on their way to becoming big companies, but still small. So you'll see a mix on the online thing. I'm trying to understand the question in my own head, but I think so are you saying how do we attract young people here? Is that?
Part of the issue of driving by a state and seeing a nice sign and stopping in, the question is, would it be a good place to raise my kids?
Right.
So that I could stop, and would it be a good place to pick up an educated population so I can start my business, and not just a sign that you see on the road?
Right, exactly. So most of us move in the period from 25 to 35. We move several times. In the first 5 years of that, we tend to go to the bigger cities, bigger gene pool, bigger number of first jobs, not our strong suit. Around 30 or so, folks start to downshift. Some of them start thinking about going to smaller cities and even towns. The reason why they do that is they want to have impact. They want to make a difference, at least those that make that downshift. That's our sweet spot. We totally give that away if when they get here, we don't let them be part of making the place. That's why they're coming here. They're coming here to help make the place. If they're frozen out of the circles of folks who are making decisions about a Hartford or a Stanford or New Haven, then we're losing our best shot at recruiting young talent. So I think that's the trick. When they're first making the decision about where they want to live, in that second half, they still are either childless or have very young children. They may be thinking about schools, but they're mostly thinking about where can I make an impact. I'm not discounting the fact that we have to have great schools, and we do. And we have a highly educated population, both that we create and we attract. And there's revolutionary things we need to think about in how we do education that would be the topic for a whole other session sometime. But I think the key to attracting mobile talent is to play to our advantage as a place of smaller, intimate places where folks can have impact, both smaller cities and towns and villages where folks feel they can actually have an impact on the place where they live. That's what they're looking for.
Well, Kip Bergstrom, I want to thank you for being here and having an impact in our state already. It's been wonderful to listen to you talk and to share some ideas with you, so thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who was here today at the Old State House.